morning to everyone on this wintry Palm Sunday. Our announcements, and I'm Holly Tangway, today's worship associate. Our announcements this morning are very brief. Next Sunday, as you probably know, is Easter Sunday. The choir has a special request that those of you who are not particularly fond of the holiday of Easter because of its Christian symbolism, come anyway. We have prepared special music, and we would love you to hear it. As usual, we will have coffee hour after the service, just through this door and down the stairs. We usually have childcare for elementary-aged children, but our childcare provider is ill today, so there will not be any childcare. If you have not yet, on your way out or before you go downstairs, take a moment to enjoy the marvelous portraits by local artist and friend Ted Hoke. Welcome, and let us begin.
Our opening words this morning are from Psalm 65. Thus have you prepared the land, drenching its furrows, breaking up its clods, softening it with showers, blessing its yield. You have crowned the year with your bounty and with abundant harvest, and now the fallow meadows overflow, the valleys are blanketed with flocks. They shout and sing for joy. So now let us sing as well. Our first hymn is number 124, Be That Guide. Lutheran, Unitarian, Universalist churches, we will light our chalice. And as we do so, you are invited to read along the affirmation that's printed in our order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. And now we will light our peace candle, thinking of all those who are not living in peace, whose lands are afflicted by war and strife, in hopes that they will find peace soon. Please be seated. And since it is Palm Sunday, this morning's reading is one of the traditional Palm Sunday readings. This is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 1 through 11. Then as they came near Jerusalem and arrived at Bethphage, at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples ahead, saying to them, "Go into the village that lies before you, and presently you will find a donkey tethered and a foal with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, say that their master needs them, and he will send them at once." This was done so as to fulfill the words spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king comes to you, modest and riding on a donkey, and with a foal, the son of a beast of burden." His disciples went and did as Jesus told them, and brought the donkey and the foal, and piled clothing on them, and he sat on this. And most of the crowd strewed clothing of their own in the road, and others cut branches from the trees and strewed them in the road. And the crowds who went before him and who came after him cried aloud, saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" And when he entered Jerusalem, all the city was disturbed and said, "Who is this?" And the multitude answered, "This is the prophet Jesus of Nazareth in Galilee." And so, in the spirit of that reading, this morning's wisdom moment will be a little different, and I'll speak from up here since we don't have a good microphone down there. But we're going to distribute the palms that are normally distributed on Palm Sunday. And the palms represent, in the ancient world, the palms represented celebration, and in particular, celebration for victory, particularly military victory. And of course, Jesus was not a military leader, as emphasized on his arrival on a donkey rather than a military charger or a horse. And so the palms we're going to distribute today are not in celebration of a victory of that kind, but in celebration just of life itself. And so as we pass out the palms, I invite you to come forward. And as you do, come forward in silence and think about what it is that you would like to celebrate in your life today. And then we'll all go back to our seats. And once everyone is settled again, we'll raise our palms and celebrate whatever it is that we have to celebrate. So as Holly and I gather the palms, I welcome all of you to come forward and take a palm. let's take a moment of quiet here, prayer and meditation.
Jeremy, announce the hymn after.
Oh, yes, thank you. And before we begin the prayer, if you could take out your hymnal and turn to hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. We'll go straight from the silence into the hymn, and we'll remain seated during the hymn. So again, hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Now let us pray. We are here today on the edge of spring, the world turning from dark to light, from death to life. We give thanks today for the awakening world, for the first flowers we see coming out, for the brave crocuses rising from their slumbering bulbs, the bulbs perhaps left, the only ones left after the rabbits have eaten the rest. And we give thanks also for the rabbits, that they can both enjoy the crocuses as we do, we in our way and they in theirs, sharing this earth and all of its fruits together. And we think also, and particularly of those who do not feel so blessed this morning, those who do not have a warm place to go to, or whose lives are marred by violence or haunted by loss. And we ask that all those suffering in mind, body, or spirit, whoever they are, wherever they may be, that they may have their burdens lightened, their hopes strengthened and restored. And we ask also for the knowledge and the wisdom to be, even in our own small ways, the deliverers from oppression and the givers of hope and strength. And so for all the world offers us, it offers so much to us all in its valleys and fields, its coasts and mountains so full of life and gladness. We give thanks today for all of this as we sit here in silence.
Our second reading this morning is by Reverend Gretchen Haley, a Palm Sunday poem, All We Can Do. All you can do is walk into Jerusalem with the hosannas ringing in your ears and the palms coming at you in every direction, when you're already remembering the bitter of what comes next. Even then, all you have is the moving forward into the city and the call that says, you've been preparing for this your whole life. That every good thing will come undone does not make it all make-believe. And when the world turns upside down and lovers become strangers and thieves and betrayers turn out to be the beloved beside you in the dark, even when the palms turn to passion, even then, you can still throw your arms open wide and turn forgiveness over and over on your tongue until it just falls out and you find yourself empty of everything for a moment, until the breath begins again, the rise and the fall, and the next morning comes gloriously steady with life.
And now, to support the work of this church, this morning's offering will be given and received. Blessings upon the gifts and upon those who give them. Please be seated. Palm Sunday, as you heard from the reading I did a few moments ago, celebrates the moment recounted in the verses from Mark, right, earlier and I think in all the Gospels, of Jesus' triumphant entrance into Jerusalem. And it's called Palm Sunday, of course, because of the palms used by the people to celebrate his arrival, since palms symbolized celebration and victory. But it's also an important moment in Jesus' story, because for many chapters now, he's been going around, gathering followers, teaching, performing miracles, and generally stirring up trouble. But now fate must be faced, and what has at times perhaps seemed like a wandering narrative suddenly gains a clear and inexorable direction as Jesus travels into Jerusalem to confront the religious and political establishment, and then, of course, be betrayed and be executed, and then, astoundingly, defeat the ultimate and greatest adversary of all, death itself, as he rises from the dead after 3 days in the tomb. But it begins here on Palm Sunday. And in between this moment, his palm-bedecked arrival in Jerusalem and his mysterious exit from the tomb, though, he will pause to have a final meal with his closest friends, the Last Supper as we call it now, which is not only one of the most poignant moments in this narrative of his life, but it's also the foundation of probably the most important ritual in all of the Christian tradition, and that's the embodied, and is really the embodied essence of the faith itself. And that is the Eucharist, or as we Low Church Protestants and descendants like to call it, communion. And so this is an important day, an important time in the Christian calendar. And as Unitarian Universalists, we still recognize the importance of this and take a moment and return for a brief time really to our Christian roots, in part because it is so important to our own history, but also because this particular holiday speaks very clearly to who we are as Unitarians, and particularly as Universalists. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And when I was growing up, I really loved Palm Sunday. I always looked forward to it, not for any religious reasons. I was not paying attention to much of that, to be honest. But Palm Sunday was important to me because as the son of the minister, I got all of the leftover palms after Palm Sunday. And I always looked forward to this. Obviously, I did not live a very exciting life. Yeah, I was a little embarrassed as I was thinking about this. I remember I would get really excited every year. It was almost like Christmas. Like, I got all the palms. My sisters never got them. I got them. I thought this was a great victory. Then I realized years later they didn't care. Anyway. But I liked, first of all, that they were so exotic. They were so unlike the kinds of plants that grow around here. And they were very different from the leaves that I was used to seeing and was familiar with. Their firm yet smooth surface, and the way it goes from kind of sturdy solidity at one end to that almost delicate evanescent tapering at the other end. And I especially enjoyed having handfuls of them, because we would have a lot left over sometimes. And I would just hold them in my hands and shake them around, and that felt fun. And when they were still connected at the base, it was really fun to slowly peel them apart one by one and drop them on the ground, leaving this array of green around me, which was so different from the often still bare trees that surrounded me in the yard. But what I enjoyed most of all, and what for me became something of an annual ritual in itself, was I would gather up the best, sturdiest fronds, grasp them securely in my hand, and it was best when they were still connected at the base. And I would carefully gather up the tips of the bunch and raise them up, and then chase and whack my sisters with it as much as possible. That was deeply satisfying. And I would do that as much as I could until eventually it would become boring, or more likely I would be told that they would be taken away if I didn't stop. But there was always a moment where it was over, and all I had left was all these palm fronds, and I didn't know what to do with them. And after all the excitement and fun I'd had, I just threw them away. And I didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of and I'm sure my sisters didn't feel this way about it, but a lot of my festive relishing of the palms as a grade schooler was actually expressive in some ways of the way early Christians approached this time of year as well. And we can see this most clearly if we look at the way communion was understood by the early church. Now today communion is, and this certainly was my experience growing up, communion is treated as the ritual reenactment of Jesus' death. And in fact, the words I recall being used at the distribution of the bread in particular were, "This is my body broken for you," which is quite expressive of that imagery. And even if the more common words or slightly more anodyne words, "this is my body given for you," is used, the effect is still the same. We are reminded of Jesus' death, of the sacrifice of himself. And I recall it being, and when I've participated in it as an adult, it still feels to me to be a very solemn ritual. But originally, that was not what communion was like at all. It was actually much more of a party. Now, several years ago, Rebecca Parker, the former dean of the Sarr King Seminary in Berkeley, wrote an article in the UU World talking about how until around the year 1000, there were almost no crucifixes in Christian churches. The crucifix is a cross with an image of Jesus upon it, and usually, especially in the height of the medieval period, they were quite gruesome, really depicting in graphic detail the suffering of Jesus on the cross, with wounds and blood, and some of them were known for still be dripping blood. It was a miracle, that the blood was still dripping. This is a major part of the embellishment of Catholic churches in the medieval period, but this is all after the year 1000. So for the first several hundred years, 1,000 years of Christianity, that was not found in churches at all. And what Rebecca Parker found is that rather than depicting Jesus as dead or suffering miserably on the way to death, in the early churches he's almost exclusively depicted as alive, and usually quite happy. Either there are scenes from the Gospels, different miracles he's performing, especially the miracle of the loaves and fishes, that was a very, very popular one, or raising Lazarus from the dead. Or he's just depicted as a shepherd, there benignly in a field with his sheep, his shepherd's staff, but never as dead, never as dying, never as suffering. And she goes on to explain that this was not just a difference of style or emphasis, but a deep difference of meaning. Really a different idea of what Christianity fundamentally is. And that this is most clearly seen in the meaning and practice of communion that the early church practiced. And she says in her article, "The Eucharist in ancient churches was celebrated as the feast of life, not as a reenactment of death. As the leaders prepared, the people greeted one another in peace and reconciliation by clasping hands and embracing or kissing. Then the great offertory processional began. Members brought gifts to support the church and offered foods for the Eucharist meal. Bread was universally served, but so were other fruits of the harvest. And Bishop Hippolytus of Rome, who lived from 170 to 236, explained, quote, "In offering fruits, roses, and lilies, the believer was celebrating the goodness of God who had given them to them. The believers read the names of God in the fruits of the earth, and God read the homage of love in the hearts of the offerers." I'm going to read that quote again from Hippolytus because I really love that. "In offering fruits, roses, and lilies, the believers were celebrating the goodness of God who had given those to them. And they read the names of God, and God read the homage of love in the hearts of the offerers." And some churches included olive oil, olives, fresh milk, cheese curds dressed with honey, grilled fish, salt, water, or wine as well. Red meat was universally banned, reflecting a Christian desire to avoid associations with Roman animal sacrifices. And when the Eucharist liturgies referred to sacrifice, they called it bloodless, which meant that prayer was their holy sacrifice. So a very different idea of what communion, what Eucharist, and Eucharist, by the way, means thanksgiving or giving thanks. A very different idea of what that is about. Not about death at all, but the opposite. Not the dying Christ, but the living Christ, the embodied divinity present here in the world with us. And she goes on to say later in her article that actually that's the way communion was understood, not as taking in ritually his dead body, but taking in a living force that would nourish us, literally as food nourishes us. And she goes on to say later in the article that this is really the message of universalism. This was what universalism brought back to the Christian church when it emerged in the late 1700s. By denying the reality of hell, the ultimate reality of hell, by affirming that everyone will finally get to heaven, it brings the living Jesus back to the earth. Since hell is no longer threatening us, we can focus on what we have. But before she explains that, she talks about what happened in the meantime. What changed in Christianity? What changed in Europe? And according to Parker, what happened is that the church became powerful. And it wanted more power. It became empire-minded. And it found that if you wanted to motivate people to, say, form an army and march off to, say, Jerusalem and conquer it, if you wanted to motivate people to kill others in service of their faith, it was more effective to talk to them about death than to talk to them about life. If the purpose of what Jesus did is focus on him sacrificing himself so that we can get into heaven, if that's the real goal, then death, our own death, becomes the goal. And no real satisfaction is available to us here on life because everything has to be postponed until that moment. And so rather than celebrating what we have, we are constantly thinking of what we don't have, constantly wanting something we can't gain until the end. And through a twist of logic, then, sacrificing other people for that goal becomes legitimate. Even a religious duty. But what a miserable way to live that is, to always be wanting, to never be able to be happy, to be satisfied. Because it creates in us a need which can never be fulfilled, a desire that never can be satisfied here on earth. All we are left with is wanting. There's always that other thing, that bit more that we'd like to have. And this is, of course, the perfect mindset for empire. Because if you can conquer one country, why not another one? If you gain something by conquering those people, you can gain even more by conquering another people. And where do you end? Where do you finish? Where do you have enough? Well, you never can have enough. And gaining more territory, more wealth, not only becomes good, it becomes who you are, what you do. It becomes your purpose for living, your meaning. And we don't have to have lived in medieval Europe or even to be Christian to feel this way. We just need to be human. This is a very common feeling. I mean, I don't know anyone who asks themselves, for instance, how little do I need? What can I do without? That is not a common question people ask themselves in living. Thoreau, of course, asked these questions, and he's so well known, and we still talk about him today because he was such a weirdo for asking them. No one asks them. He stands out because he did, and he tried to live out those questions. He still today does not have many real followers. In fact, I was in Concord, his former home, last night. I went to a restaurant on Thoreau Street. I paid $15 for a cocktail. I don't think he would have. To be honest, it wasn't even that good. And in Concord today, it's still a beautiful town. It has large, beautiful homes. They're all very expensive. And so are the cars, large and expensive. And the people living in that town are wonderful people. But they take up a lot on this earth. They cost a lot to the earth to live as they do in Concord. And we in Gloucester are really not that different. It's a question perhaps of scale, but not really of difference. But we need to become different. Increasingly, we hear a lot of talk about death, the impending death of our coastal cities, of the accelerating dying of our climate-ravaged countries. And some people even talk about the ultimate extinction, impending extinction of the human race. And some of them seem to rather relish that idea, as if that is a new kind of salvation to be had. I don't think that's the way to see it. And I don't think the way we've talked about these concerns, which are very real, is helping. Because I haven't seen much difference in the way we live. Because I still see around me and feel within me a thought about, well, what more can I get? Wouldn't it be nice if I had that? Wouldn't I be happier if I could do those things? Because there's always that new car, even if it's electric, or that more commodious house, or that improved whatever it is, there in front of us, asking us to go after it. But instead we should think about what we have. Go back to the ancient Eucharist of fruits and roses and lilies. I mean, we don't even need palms for this. Really, the palms themselves are something of a luxury, because they come from, depending on what article you read, Florida or Texas or Central America. We have plenty of wonderful plants growing right around us here. Maybe not quite at this time of the year, but there's always holly, evergreens. If we wait a little bit, we can have our maples and our oaks again. We can't look to gain paradise. Instead, we need to look around us to see the paradise that we already have here. And we can if we learn to look again, if we learn to read the names of God and the fruits of the earth. To read the names of God and the fruits of the earth. That would be a wonderful way to live, to see the world in that way. If we're able to do that, it will change us. We will no longer be people living through our wants or our unsatisfied needs, but will become people living out of the bounty, the gladness of what we have, and who are people who can give rather than take. And then, inside of us, God will be able to read the homage of love in the heart of us, the offerers. And so may it be so. And now let us say together the prayer that Jesus taught to his disciples, the prayer of simpleness and thanksgiving. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our final hymn this morning is number 276, O Young and Fearless Prophet.
Amen.
Now let us pull up our palms and go forth today in gladness and celebration. May we carry that wherever we go, from here until next Palm Sunday. Amen.
Amen.